We finally know the truth regarding the health allegations that have been circulating regarding President Russell Marion. The hospital has seen him many times since he turned 100. There is little optimism from his physicians on the scenario. It's obvious he's starting to relax. The life of President Nelson was extremely extraordinary. As the pastor of a church with more than 17 million members, he was able to build a prosperous career and a happy family. Is his 100th birthday going to be his last? That is the big question. Let's check at his most recent health report and get into the facts. In Salt Lake City, Utah, on September 9, 1924, the eventful life of Russell Marion Nelson began. 2 sisters and a brother were born to him by Floss Edna and Marion Clavar Nelson. Before becoming general manager of Gillum Advertising, Nelson's father worked as a journalist for the Deseret News. His parents sent him and his brothers to Sunday school even though they weren't practicing Latter-day Saints. He became a full-fledged member of the church at the age of 16 and had his baptism there. Interests as a boy were all over the place. While his father had an advertising agency, he assisted him. Additionally, he had part-time jobs at a bank, a post office, and a photography studio. The school's debate team also included Russell Nelson. Besides football, he was a talented pianist. In an earlier joke, he mentioned that he would be a heart surgeon in the future and how he would be careful to protect his hands. It was no laughing matter since he went on to make a livelihood by slicing people open. A frequent church performer, Russell Nelson possessed a beautiful voice. Gansel White, who would later become his wife, possessed a stunning vocal range as well. This was the initial event that prompted their eventual union. As soon as he heard Mrs. Wright sing, he knew he had found her. On August 31, 1945, 3 years subsequent, Nelson wed her. Before they had their first kid, Dansel taught and had her bachelor's degree. To ensure her family's success, she made many sacrifices. Their 6 girls were to be Dansel and Nelson's priority before they even started practicing. They were able to provide the best life they could for their 10 children, whom they welcomed into the world with open arms. Regrettably, Dansel passed away quietly in Salt Lake City in 2005. Standing by her side was her husband, Russell Nelson. Nelson was a diligent student and young adult. In his mid-teens, he worked as an assistant secretary at the bank while studying at LDS Business College. He joined the Sigma Chi chapters Owl and Chi and Beta Epsilon after graduating from high school and before he even stepped foot on campus at the University of Utah. He was a member of Phi Beta Kappa and received a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1945. He then went on to attend medical school at the University of Utah. As if that weren't impressive enough, Nelson was the top student in his medical school class and earned a doctorate degree. His young age was just 22. Following graduation from medical school, he completed his residency in medicine at the University of Minnesota. He created the heart-lung machine that allowed for the first open heart surgery on a human being when he was a student at the institution. For his work in the field, Russell Nelson was awarded a Ph.D. by the University of Minnesota. Prior to his appointment as a prophet, seer, and revelator in the church, Russell Nelson had a distinguished career as a cardiac surgeon. It was considered impossible to operate on a human heart in the 1920s. Nothing had changed throughout Russell Nelson's time at the University of Utah as a medical student. The status quo, though, made him uneasy. Because touching a beating heart would cause it to stop, his teachers warned him against doing so. This made no sense. Imagine if it were possible to regenerate a human heart. Perhaps he and his colleagues could come up with a way to provide patients a second opportunity. Due to his insatiable curiosity, he assembled a group of individuals that shared his views. While he was a resident and a doctoral candidate at the University of Minnesota, his fascination with the human heart led him to experiment with the first heart-lung bypass system. He contributed to the first device that could keep a dog alive for 30 minutes by 1948. When you consider how hard it seemed back then, you can see how this changed the game. The machine's size prevented it from being relocated when it was prepared to be tested on human patients. Nelson and his crew, though, persisted. They started over with the sketch. Additional heart-lung bypass machines were commenced. This time it could fit in a surgical operating room with ease. You won't believe what happened next. He developed this gadget with the help of his late wife, Dancel. In addition to his surgical expertise, Nelson has strong bioengineering skills. On a human subject, this novel apparatus was first implanted in March 1951. Due to the complexity of the situation, the patient did not make it through the operation. But this device did get Nelson and his crew one step closer to discovering the answers. This marked a fresh beginning for the dedicated medical staff. When Nelson got back to Utah in 1955, he took a position as assistant professor of surgery and director of the residency program for thoracic surgery. He improved upon the heart-lung bypass machine there. On November 9, 1955, this apparatus was utilized for the initial open-heart surgery in Utah. Vernell Worthen, who underwent surgery to repair an atrial septal defect, enjoyed a long and healthy life following the procedure. Just so you know, Russell Nelson uncovered some long-lost solutions to cardiac ailments. It all made sense to him now, and he had his desires fulfilled. In the end, the hospital hired a reputable machine shop to make the gadget. Nelson successfully operated on a child's heart for the first time in March 1956. He successfully corrected a 4-year-old girl's tetralogy of Fallot. He oversaw multiple procedures that targeted coronary artery disease, along with significantly contributing to the development of valvular surgery. The first repair of tricuspid valve regurgitation was conducted by him on a Latter-day Saint stake patriarch in 1960, which was a high point. The reverse flow of blood into the upper chamber of the heart is the result of this condition. The initial person to resolve this was Dr. Nelson. Multiple aortic valve replacements were performed by him in 1968. Spencer W. Kimball had this operation done by him later on. Kimball would go on to become the president of the LDS Church. The 1985 quadruple bypass surgery that President Nelson conducted on Fang Rongxiang, a Chinese opera singer, was another watershed moment in his presidency. He made the long journey to Jinan, China, just for this procedure. He performed it as his final operation. Even now, the Fang family counts him as an old friend of China and is eternally thankful to him. In 2018, President Nelson was honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award for his groundbreaking work in cardiac surgery and cardiac medicine. The 2018 Governor's Medals for Science and Technology were presented to him along with 3 others in Utah. Among his many accolades are the following: the Golden Plate Award from the American Academy of Achievement, the Citation for International Service from the American Heart Association, the Heart of Gold Award from the American Heart Association, and the Distinguished Alumni Award from the University of Utah. Additionally, he is a recipient of 3 honorary professorships from different universities in China. The 3 editions of Who's Who include Him Who in Religion, Who in America, and Who in the World. He flew to Illinois in the fall of 1965 to investigate an enticing offer to lead the University of Chicago's cardiovascular and thoracic surgery unit. He and Dancel discovered the ideal area to bring up their 9 girls the moment he arrived. He wasn't sure about the position, but he was looking forward to the research and career chances it would provide. Dallin H. Oakes, a young law professor from Chicago, and June, his wife, were his companions for an evening. The possibilities in Chicago were something he shared with the newlyweds. It was a huge deal, so Dallin tried his hardest to convince him to accept the offer. Dr. Nelson was overjoyed with the post, but he was still waiting to hear from someone else. Several days after that, he paid a visit to David O. McKay, who was the head of the church at the time. The facts were laid forward by President McKay. The department would be led by Dr. Nelson. 5 times his present income would be his pay. His children's education would be covered by the school, among other perks. This enticing offer would be accepted by any decent man with a wife and 9 daughters. However, President David requested that Russell Nelson decline the offer, so Nelson did just that. This set him up for success in his subsequent capacity as president of the church. His 34 years of service in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles prepared him to be named the 17th president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. During quorum gatherings, he would play the organ and speak to the members in their own languages. Members of the Quorum of 12 think he's the greatest writer among them. President Nelson consecrated churches in 133 different nations throughout his tenure as an apostle. He helped the church gain access to China and Eastern Europe. During his time at the Utah headquarters, he presided over 3 separate councils, one for the missionaries, one for the temple and family history, and one for the priesthood and family. Thomas S. Monson, the 16th president of the church, died on January 2, 2018. The leadership was passed on to the senior member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles following his departure. January 14, 2018 was the day of Russell Marion Nelson's ordination and setting apart. The 17th president of the church was he. This was broadcast from the Salt Lake Temple by D. Todd Christopherson, the senior apostle of the church. This came after the new leaders of the church were introduced. As head of the highest governing body of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the presidency is the highest office of the church. For those who belong to this sect, the president possesses the gifts of a prophet, seer, and revelator. He is revered as a prophet among them. For Latter-day Saints, President Russell serves as an envoy from God and the pinnacle of earthly priesthood authority. On everyone's behalf, he is the only one who hears God's revelations. The church's members feel deeply about the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God, no matter where they call home. As President Nelson once said, "Consequently, no matter where we reside in this magnificent globe, our utmost happiness is derived from assisting our fellow humans." Because of this, his church distributed $1.3 billion in help to those in need in 2023. This aid was provided to people of all racial and religious backgrounds. Women and children were beneficiaries of part of the gift. Child nutrition became a global priority for the church under his leadership. The World Food Program and Save the Children were among the foreign NGOs that received donations from it. The church's partnership with UNICEF in the Central African Republic and Mozambique also improved maternal health care. Millions of cash have been donated to the Israel-Hamas war by the faith. Israel and Gaza both benefit from these investments in mental and physical health services. In 2023, the Church of President Nelson joined together with other humanitarian organizations to provide relief to immigrants and refugees around the world. The religious group went to Sacramento, California and purchased 500 foam mats and other necessities for the homeless. The North American fight against hunger, homelessness, and abuse was assisted by Latter-day Saints aid. More than $750 made a difference in Montreal. Something was given to a neighborhood shelter for those experiencing homelessness. The island of Maui was able to recover from the disastrous flames in part because of the faith. It distributed hotel vouchers and offered emergency shelter. It also sent disaster relief psychiatrists to assist the local population. In an effort to lessen its impact on the environment, the church planted 140,000 trees in Mongolia, outfitted numerous meeting halls with solar panels, and began using only recycled cups for communion. To aid in the preservation of the Great Salt Lake, the Church of President Nelson donated 20,000 acres of Utah water. Members can organize more manageable service projects through the church's Just Serve program. Those are just a few examples of the church's humanitarian work, according to President Nelson. Among the most influential leaders in history, without a question, is his. Nevertheless, it has recently been criticized. Some people think the church does not welcome everyone. There were some LGBTQ members who were hoping he would make policy changes. In 2019, his controversial decision to reverse the restriction on baptisms for children of gay parents propelled him to fame. Another regulation that he reversed was the one that classified same-sex couples as heretics and allowed for their expiation. Subsequently, his government backed the legislation that protected same-sex marriage. It seemed like President Nelson would be completely on board with the LGBTQ community based on his body language. A few of his policies were reversed by him a few months later. Everyone who identifies as LGBTQ is welcome in his church, he says. But he insisted that since God's definition of marriage remains the same-sex marriage is sinful. Furthermore, self-destructive behavior is not supported by genuine love. In his view, same-sex relationships are fatal to both partners. Transgender people were likewise restricted in their involvement by him within the church. Disappointingly, group members feel excluded because of their gender identity or expression. Even President Nelson's position on women in leadership roles has drawn criticism. Although he gives the impression of loving and appreciating women, many believe his view of womanhood is sexist and outmoded. As an example, he stresses how important it is for women to put parenthood first. Because being a woman is a holy calling, he continues, women should follow their passions. Because of this concept, women cannot be ordained as priests or preside over religious ceremonies like baptism or the blessing of sacramental symbols. Still, they're in charge, preach from the pulpit every once in a while, and lead the prayers of the congregation. President Nelson keeps giving it his best, even though it's tough leading more than 17 million members. Keep in mind that he is the president with the longest life expectancy and that he is not getting any younger. His health is deteriorating and he just turned 100. The century-old is having trouble keeping up with the modern world. He was unable to attend the general conference held in downtown Salt Lake City in 2023. He made it public in a statement that he had followed the general session virtually. He detailed how he hurt his lower back muscles after a fall. His life was irrevocably altered by the experience. What followed was a party honoring his 99th birthday. He stumbled and fell while he was still rejoicing. The physicians are uncertain about his speed of recovery at 99 years old, but thankfully he reacted quickly to treatment. To aid in his recovery, they recommended a cautious and gradual course of treatment. Even after a year, he hasn't fully recovered. The news has it that he has trouble sitting still for extended periods of time. He denied his health was deteriorating until quite recently. He eventually gave in on a few points. To begin, his travels have diminished recently. For his twice-yearly general conference talks, he began sitting on a chair in 2022. Typically, he would rise to address the congregation of millions. Those days are over. He denied the rumor a few months ago that he occasionally utilizes a walker or wheelchair whenever he has a slight problem with his balance. Let's be real, this challenge is anything but minor. My spirit, legs, and brain still work, he continued. At the end of his speech, he assured us that his balancing issue was the least of our concerns. There have been other church presidents who have experienced a decrease in health besides President Nelson. Thomas Spencer Monson, who was before him, had memory loss just before he passed away. When he skipped a meeting with President Obama and reduced his speaking engagements in half in 2015, members learned about his health problems. The church leadership revealed 2 years later that, due to age restrictions, President Monson no longer visits his office or attends meetings. While President Monson did not skip either Saturday or Sunday's conference sessions at that year's Faith Spring General Conference, he did give 2 brief sermons. At the age of 90, Monson passed away on January 2, 2018. The 15th president of the church, Gordon Hinckley, presided over it from 1995 to January 2008. Thankfully, he never deteriorated mentally or physically. Until his death in 2008 at the age of 97, he kept giving speeches at religious conferences. Howard Hunter, who was elected as the 14th president of the church in June 1994, was only in office for 9 months. The date of his death is March 3, 1995, and he was 87 years old. The 13th president, Ezra Taft Benson, passed away in May 1994 at the age of 94. He spent his last 5 years away from the spotlight. He made few public appearances and hardly spoke to the faithful at gatherings. The 1973 inauguration of Spencer W. Kimball, the 12th president, followed a similar pattern. He began to disappear from public view in 1982. Up until his death in 1988, at the age of 90, Kimball made it to at least one session of the General Conference every 2 years. President Nelson may be winding down, but he isn't going down without a fight. Following his doctor's orders, he is also eating healthily. His diet consists primarily of plant-based foods. He gets a lot of his nutrition from fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. Lean poultry and fish make up a tiny portion of his diet. Whole foods are more appealing to him than processed ones. He thinks that the best way to get all the nutrients from food is to eat natural foods. His diet was shaped by his work as a surgeon. His life experiences have molded his views on healthy eating and living. He saw directly how one's way of life affects their health. He was motivated to put his health first after this. He is still going strong at 100 years of age, so his small tricks must be paying off. He stays fit by exercising regularly as well. Faithful have been profoundly affected by his way of living. Since he took office as president, the church's vegan membership has grown. Many of his followers have followed in his footsteps and gone plant-based as a result of his teachings. The church's website features a recipe area that is devoted to vegetarian and vegan fare. You can discover recipes for meals that are both healthful and nutritious there. I think you would enjoy it. On September 9, 2024, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints celebrated the president's 100th birthday despite his deteriorating health. Members of his family, friends, and pastors all came together to celebrate his special day with joyful tributes. From its theater in Salt Lake City's Full House Conference Center on Temple Square, the event was aired live. Sitting on the stage with him was President and Sister Wendy Nelson. Both President Henry Eyring and President Dallin Oaks, who were his advisors, were present on stage with him. The president had earlier encouraged his churchgoers to reach out to someone in need and demonstrate their love and concern. To illustrate his argument, he cited the story of the lost sheep. He suggested that they use social media to talk about what had happened. In a moving speech, the Centenarian thanked all those who had complied. Praying for the church was his last prayer in his brief remarks. Regarding the religious leaders, they thought back on their meeting with the president. He was characterized as a Renaissance man by President Holland. Few people knew that he could speak 17 languages until he turned 100 years old. To commemorate his special day, loved ones sent him recorded notes. The tributes concluded with a Feliz Cumpleaños performance by the musicians of Luz de las Naciones in the conference center. Jared Pierce, Jenny Oaks, and Nathan Pacheco were also well received by the audience. Together, Pacheco and Baker performed We Ever Pray for Thee after Pacheco sung Una Furtiva Lagrima. Members of President Nelson's family who have passed on the torch have performed the song I Will Be What I Believe. Rejoice, the Lord is King, and we praise Thee, O God. For a prophet the assembly sang with great emotion, adding spice to the service. Birthday songs and blessings brought them to a joyful close. The congregation could watch the service live on their YouTube account. Details can be found in the 75-minute broadcast. If President Russell Nelson were to pass away today, President Dallin H. Oaks would assume the presidency. The highest-ranking apostle serves as head of the church. In his current role as first counselor, President Oaks is overseeing the first presidency. An 88-year-old man he is. In the event that the current president dies before the most senior apostle, the position of president will be filled.